Evening, one and all, and thank you for joining me for yet another episode of Be My Guest this week. We've got, as always, three amazing guests lined up for you tonight, and all with amazing stories. I picked the theme this week of Navigate Life, and I think all of them have amazing stories that they'll share around their life's journey and how they've been, through adversity, motivated to live a fulfilled life and a life with purpose. Don't forget, I would love for you guys to share the stream. So let's build a little bit of an audience tonight. Do that by visiting the People with a Passion Facebook page. So once you see the stream there, you just pick the channel that you want to share it to. So I'm just going to share it to my personal page, but you can start a watch party if you choose to. And by all means, reach out to people and let's build an audience so that our guests can hear some questions from the audience and receive some questions. Also, if you're happen to be watching on the YouTube channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If this is your first time here, then please, by all means, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be advised when new interviews and live streams are actually uploaded. So appreciate you guys all joining me tonight. As I say, we've got amazing guests. So my first guest I'd like to bring in is a retired Lieutenant Colonel, a US Marine, and his name is Chris Lozano. So without further ado, here he is. Hey, Chris. Good morning to you. Good evening, my end. So thank you for being up, as many of our US guests are early in the morning, but it's something that you do regularly. You tell me you're normally into your second coffee by this time. Is that your second one?
It is.
So what's the deal with getting up so early in the morning? Is that out of habit, having spent 26 years in the military?
Yes, in large part I think so. I think I'm just wired to naturally enjoy the solitude of the morning, and it gives me a chance just to kind of get set and have some alone time and some thinking time, and certainly a lot of years of habit of getting very little sleep and being used to functioning that way. But I was, even in war, I was always one of the first ones up, and always one of the last ones to go to bed. I just don't enjoy sleeping.
So let's talk about your journey. And we've got about half an hour, and I know that it's a full journey, and there is an episode of Know Their Story, which is a podcast that you were on. And if people want to go and listen to that podcast, it'll give them a lot more background into your military experience. But do you want to just talk about that journey and how you got into the military, how you did multiple tours of duty to Iraq and Afghanistan, and just tie up that experience coming back so we can get into the music and things that you do now?
You bet. I joined the Marine Corps in 1981. I was just a typical young man who was lost and just was spending too much time not doing useful things. My father died, and I didn't really have any direction. So I had met a young man who had impressed me in his bearing and in his his accomplishments already. He was a 23, 24 Vietnam veteran at the time, and I just said I want whatever he has. So I joined, and it changed my life. But it really met up with the thing that I've always spent my life doing, which is pursuing excellence. And I went did that, and then I wanted to become an officer, so I became an officer. I wanted to become a lawyer, so I became a lawyer. And I continued on both my military career with periods of active duty. I spent a fair amount of time in the Marine Corps Reserve, which is our reserve force in the Marine Corps, and then was just kind of moving along in life, not doing anything super exciting. And then 9/11 happened, and when 9/11 happened, that was a Tuesday, and I just knew that I was going to be needed. I mean, it's one of those things you don't need to even ask the question. And so, being in the military is a lot like being on the bench waiting to get put in the game, and you know that you don't know when you're going in, but when you get called and coach says, go in, you got to be ready. So I came home on 9/11 and I packed my sea bags and put them by the door. And I got a call that day, and was on my way and was gone for almost 2.5 years that time. And during that time, I went to first Afghanistan in 2002 and then Iraq 2003, actually Kuwait then for the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And then went back in Iraq in 2006 and 2007 in Anbar province. And, I kind of went from private and I just found myself eventually lieutenant colonel. And it was just one of those things that never ceased to amaze me, but it also really, I think, bears witness to the power of meritocracy, that you achieve what you aspire to. And if you don't aspire to it, and if you don't set out as goals, you're never going to make it. So that was what took me there.
So I heard in your story that you were lost at a young age, that you weren't on the straight and narrow, and you more or less had to give yourself some accountability. And if I understand correctly, your father had passed while you were younger. Is that correct?
That's correct. My father died when I was 19. And I had always been fascinated with the military. I had grown up watching the Vietnam War unfold. I was born in 1960, so I was a young lad watching the war on TV. And my dad worked in defense, designing fighter aircraft for McDonnell Aircraft. And I wanted to join. I wanted to be a Marine as a young boy. And my dad said, "No, you're going to college." And so I did. And then when he died, I just became rudderless and drinking and carousing and doing the things that the young men do. And I had that moment where I was pretty pathetic. And I just said, you got to do something. You got to do something to bring yourself straight. And I knew the Marines would do that. And so I essentially gave myself no choice. I signed up. I literally signed up, the morning after I made the decision, and was gone, and then it led me down that path. Never regretted it.
So as a young man entering the military, and then now 26 years, you were 26 years in the military. So it's not 26 years on. I believe you're 26 years in the military, so correct that. Yeah. But so it's tough when guys do any tour of duty, and you have seen a lot and done a lot that makes you a changed man. So do you want to speak to, firstly, what does the military teach you as a man? Like, what do you miss being retired now? What do you miss about being part of the military, despite the things that go on in the military that you're asked to do, and that you have to defend against?
Well, that's a great question. I would say I miss it every day. And I miss it first and foremost for being surrounded by people with common purpose. And that common purpose of getting up knowing that we had a singular mission, that we all were driven by the same thing, is tremendously powerful, because that helps make you give your best all the time. And so, being surrounded by people driven to excellence, where that is the norm. It's not even noteworthy to be excellent. It's just expected. That's the average. And so then to even be noteworthy above that is an extraordinary accomplishment. But more importantly, it makes pursuit of that not about yourself. It makes it about the betterment of the good for everyone. And I really appreciated the selflessness of the military life. I love the hardship. I love getting up and facing hardship. I loved waking up, sleeping on rocks, and drinking cold coffee, and being hungry and being fatigued, and bearing through it. It harkened right back to my early days of sports as a young man. And that was really the thing that felt so familiar to me when I started.
I was going to ask you around the parallel between sport, what you're describing there. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's on the extreme, and you're giving service to your country, mm-hmm. Which you can't compare sport and the two. Like, you can't really compare the two in that regard. But some of the traits that you talk about now, you're interestingly, you told me, at the head of the program. I knew you were doing baseball, but you actually got a role as a college baseball coach. So how important is that to you? Like having now, it's because it depends on how you approach it, but to some extent you can treat the regimen the same as the military when you've got a team to work with.
Oh, absolutely. So the parallel for me is first and foremost the disciplined approach to getting better. To be, I call it demand excellence. I tell my players, demand excellence in everything that you do. Everything. If you are walking from point A to point B, you're wrong. You could be running. That's an extra lap. That's a little bit of extra conditioning. So my players run wherever they go. Don't waste a moment to get better, I tell them. If you're in the cage of swinging a bat, you better be doing it right. You better be using it with purpose. And so for me, those are the common things. But, I got into coaching baseball, of course, as a player, and then first as a father, as a coach. And I kept in it because I just could see that people are missing the idea that they can be using common things like getting up in the morning to become better. And how do you further yourself? You have to have purpose in your life. And I love seeing the impact that I have on young baseball players. And I coached high school for many years, and now I'm coaching college baseball. And just to see them in the early stages of learning and how you can impact them. And then years later, when they call you and they're now fathers and coaches and themselves, and they reflect back on what they learned and they say, thank you. And I learned something. And it's the same. I got the same thing as a Marine when a young man would say, you drove me to be a better leader. And it's not for the recognition. It's for the sense of accomplishment of a purpose. I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah. So something that you and I have similar in common is I work with young people as well with basketball, and it is a motivating factor. I've been doing what I do for 30 years, and it is my business now. So basketball's what I do. So I absolutely love it and I'm married to it. But so I understand what you're saying. It absolutely resonates with me, the impact that you can have on a young person's life, and obviously your life experience, as I have had life experience as a man, you feel a responsibility or an empowerment to actually impart some of your life lessons onto the youth so that they can avoid some of the mistakes that you may well have made or make to this day. But look, I want to move the conversation along a little bit. Baseball, I could talk sport all day and I don't want to go there because it's just a passion like for me, but I want to talk about a passion that you've fallen into. Not so much fallen into, you took up music at a young age. I want to talk about your first guitar, where you got your first guitar, and how you had this big gap where you didn't pick up a guitar, and then what led you to pick it up again, and now to pursue music, even though it is a profession to a degree because you are playing on stages in clubs. I want to talk about what got you back into it and why it's so important to your life now.
I think if I really thought about it, it's because I've always been wired differently, and it always felt like there was more inside me than I could verbalize, and it would just resonate in my head, and it would just usually come out in unproductive ways. So when I was 8, my parents bought me really just one of those cheap guitars I got at the department store, and I just started playing with it, and it was just something that connected in my head to my fingers, and I just loved it, and I taught myself how to play. I took some lessons early, but didn't really stick with me very well. And then I was about 12, and I realized that that was a way to impress the young ladies that were now suddenly present in my eyes. I began earnestly to learn the guitar and learn the craft of guitar, and I just found myself to be pretty decent at it. I began songwriting, and I really wanted to pursue music as a career. That wasn't part of my brain, and then the other side of my brain was wanting to do something physical, which was, by the way, another way to express myself. And so I joined the Marines, and I had my always had my guitars and other instruments, but it became hard to bring them along. And then I got married, became a young father, and they just became less prevalent in my life, became less important. And then pretty soon years would go by and I would not see them or use them, and they gathered dust. And, every now and then I would reminisce about my club days as a young man. And, but I really never did anything with it. And so to kind of tie the story together is I have a large family. I have 7 kids, and my oldest son, David, who was just such a wonderful, happy young man, died in 2009 of a pulmonary embolism. He died very suddenly, and certainly we weren't prepared or expecting it. And that loss, combined with my wartime experiences and kind of the impact that had on my life, really drove me into another thing that I had dealt with most of my life, which was depression. And I like to tell people that while war doesn't damage everybody, war changes everybody. And when you come with what you come into it, you leave with it. And so if you come in and you have depression in your life, well, then it's now compounded by your experiences. And so, you add all those things together, I really spun into a very deep depression. And I tried medication, I tried therapy, and they were having some impact. But then one day a musician friend of mine called, and he could see it. He could see that I was in pain. He could see that I was struggling. And he just said, "Hey, brother, pick up your guitar, please." And, he was quite worried for me, as it turns out. And I did. And it was like opening a window into my soul. It just allowed all of that to kind of reconnect. And I just started pouring my heart into my music. And whether anybody hears me play or not really is, not the important thing. It's that it's just kind of a way for me to connect the missing parts in my brain with my soul. And so that's how I started playing again.
It's one of those things I find, as I mentioned at the top of the show prior to us going live, that I speak with a lot of people about their passion, and a lot of people fall into their passion or are looking for purpose. Some are looking for a form of escapism, and there's a lot of people I've spoken to who have faced adversity in their life, and they gravitate to things they may have done as a child to not, it may answer one of those questions, to give them purpose, a sense of fulfillment. But for you, this has been an out for you because it's a way in which you can actually speak to some of the things that you've experienced in your life through the writing of the lyrics. So you have some very powerful lyrics to some of your songs. Do you want to describe some of the words in your songs and why they're significant? There's probably a lot that's packed into that question, but can you give us some examples and elaborate on why they are significant to your story?
Yeah. Wow. Where do I start with that question? I will say the response I've gotten from especially combat veterans is you're saying things that I never thought I'd hear, which are things that are important to me. You describe things that I've seen and felt, and you're giving words to my experience. And that comes not only with a lot of gratitude for that statement for me, but a lot of responsibility. And I think the one lyric that comes to mind is in a song I wrote called "The Long Way Home," that's going to be in a documentary about combat veterans. And it says, "When I close my eyes, I go to war. I battle. The angels battle for my soul with the enemy and the booze." And I had to think about that one, but it just talks about the turmoil that can go on, and that turmoil can come from a lot of things. It's not just about the things you see or do. It's about the things you miss, for me, a big part of my regret was just being gone for so long and missing out on so much of my kids' lives, and then my son dying, and my responsibility in that, was very heavy. So the words are a way to frame emotion that are hard to describe for people, and then it allows them to connect however that experience connects them to it. I also try to write lyrics that aren't quite so literal for everybody. It's easy to make literal statements, but I like to try to write words that can be more universal in their meaning. That way people can kind of line things up with their own experience.
So I'm not sure if you finished the statement there, but
if you let me talk, I'll just keep talking.
No, you're right, mate. I listened, as I said, and if people want to go check it out, the Know Their Story is a good podcast that you shared with me, so I could get a bit of background for you. And there's a lot of insight into veterans in there, and I didn't want to unpack that so much tonight because there is a podcast there that speaks to that, and I wanted to speak to your music, which that one touched on, but didn't necessarily get the opportunity to elaborate with. So obviously COVID played a hand in what you can do in the music scene, but you've obviously played for veterans events. I saw photos up of you playing for veterans events. So obviously a very connected audience there, given your experience as a lieutenant colonel. And you've had tours. I'll come back to this so people get a bit of understanding of the background behind some of your music, that you walk the walk. And I would say talk the talk. Now you're singing the song based on reality for you, and that's why it resonates, because I talk about common human experience a lot on my show, and I think people often feel that their experience is their own, not realizing that when you talk to other people, that other people have actually gone through a lot of the same stuff that you've gone through. So when you have the power to present those stories through music and it resonates with others, it makes people feel that they're not alone in this common human experience. So let's come back to just a little bit of Afghanistan and also, Iraq, if you want to talk about that, but and talk to a couple of the experiences that actually shaped you, particularly when you were leaving Afghanistan and your last flight out, because that's a pretty harrowing story if you want to go into that.
Well, that was actually, if you're talking about that story, that one's Iraq. So I'm going to tell you a story I didn't tell on the other podcast. And I also write. I wrote an article on LinkedIn called "When the Minefield is Real." So I was a combat engineer, and I did, as part of my duties as a combat engineer, I was responsible for mine clearance in Afghanistan, again in Iraq. And we were mapping a minefield in Bagram, which is north of Kabul. And I had a small team, and we were surveying, right? And I mean, you have to go out. I mean, you have to understand where the minefield's at if you're going to mark it, and if you're going to then possibly clear it. But you don't do it recklessly. It's a very purposeful, kind of methodical thing. So we left a hard packed road, and I had a guide with me, and I asked him, this used to be Soviet base. I said, "Are there mines here?" And he shook his head. He goes, "Oh, no mines here." I said, "Okay, I got to take his word. He's my guide." So we're walking single file, and we're walking to another road that we're trying to get to begin marking. And I was in the front, and then literally I looked up and I see a white triangle, right? And it says mines on it. Right? To anybody, you're going to say, okay, great, you're about to walk into a minefield. To a military guy, I'm already in a minefield, because red is for the person looking in, white is for the person inside it. That's how you know you're inside the minefield. So I said, "Oh, poop." And I just remember my blood just ice cold. And then I got really focused, and I remember I squatted down in my spot, and I just sat there. I had everybody freeze, and I just sat there, and I just said, "Now what? What do you do?" All right. And we were about 50 yards into this minefield, and I just had everybody turn around. Low probability would say go back in the same places that you were just at. So we literally turned around and walked back in our footsteps. And then we finally, made it back. And I won't tell you what I said to my guide. I'll only tell you that he became very clear to him that he had messed up. And, and then we all had a good laugh. And that literal walking into a minefield became a very strong way for me to connect other experience about the unexpected and how do you respond to that. Sometimes minefield's real, but sometimes it's figurative, and we all have the same moment where we have to think, now what? And so I held on to that one for a long time. But the one I wrote about that, and I like to think, there's a point where every song becomes the most important song I wrote to me for some reason. But there's, a song I wrote called "I Dodged a Bullet," and we hear that phrase a lot, in life. I dodged a bullet. Well, when you've literally dodged a bullet, it changes, how you think about things, and sometimes you don't dodge the bullet. All right, so there's a level of lack of control over those things that you have, and a lot of times the randomness of your choices play into that. So I was leaving Iraq in 2003, and my departure was rather sudden and unplanned. I was just told that I was leaving on the advance party, heading back to Camp Pendleton, and it had to do with the pending birth of my youngest son, which I was grateful for, but certainly hadn't planned. But then they gave me no way out. They didn't tell me how I was getting back to Kuwait, and they just told me to figure it out, which is a very Marine thing to do. And I'm like, all right, I got to move 600 kilometers on my own, cross, a combat zone and make it to Kuwait so I can catch an airplane. Right on. So I had two choices. I had a helicopter that I could catch, and I had a ground convoy that I could take. And the decision came down to this. I don't like helicopters. All right, I've flown on many of them. The Marine Corps helicopters are old and smoky and leak, and they're just not fun to fly in if you're not a pilot. And and also I didn't want an abrupt departure. It was already going to be abrupt enough, and I thought that day and a half, 2-day journey on the ground would give me a chance to just kind of let the moment wash over me and give me an end to the story. And so I did, and I made it back eventually to Kuwait, and then from Kuwait back to the States, and actually made it home in time for the birth of my son. And it was just a day later, maybe, that while perusing through the news, I saw an article that helicopter that I'd almost taken crashed and killed everybody. Yeah.
So literally dodged.
Yeah.
So and there were no survivors in that crash. So you could have, it was a life choice, literally. You could have gone either way. If you'd have made the choice to be on the helicopter that day, I won't say may not have seen the birth of your youngest. You would not have seen the birth of your youngest, and he would not have a father.
Yeah.
So interestingly, I named the show, this episode today, Navigate Life, inspired by your story of the minefield, and that life is a minefield. It's chaotic and no one knows the future. We plan for the future. Interestingly, we think there's a degree of control there, but we don't know if there will be tomorrow for any of us.
And pandemic, I mean, how could we plan effectively for what that's done to our world?
So absolutely. Look, I know you and I, and maybe down the track we will connect again. I would love to get more of your story. I hope there's a book in the pipeline. I'm sure people have asked you for a book. I don't know how good your writing is. I know it's good for some writing. So, but I don't know whether you've thought about a book at all. But I'm sure if not you're going to be part of, or your music's going to be part of a documentary for veterans. So I'm sure there's a lot of veterans that would be looking to tell or share their story, to humanize their experience too, because I think there's a lot of detachment that everyday people really don't understand what it means to serve in those environments. And I think just to finish it, you sort of talk about in a recent podcast I listened to that people don't, that you don't see yourself, even though you served as a hero, that you see that as your civil duty, and that for you, that is one of the highest callings you can have, but it's also a calling that there's firefighters and nurses and doctors, and you see yourself just as part of a big contingent of people that are doing the best to help protect their country.
Well, I do truly believe that, and I appreciate when people say things, they value what I've done or they call it heroic. I don't view what I do heroic at all. I consider it civic duty. But I'm glad to have done it, right? When you're serving in combat, I'm glad that I was there to do that, not somebody else in my community, right? Some people are just wired differently. Okay, just like in sports, to stand out there and put yourself out on the line physically and emotionally and to give your best is not for everybody, and it shouldn't be for everybody. It should be for the people that aspire to that. And I'm glad I did it. And I'm glad there are people just like there are police officers and nurses and all those who are called to those things. I think that's important, is you find that thing, and that our world functions when we have people that can operate in a selfless environment and do it for the betterment of others, not just for the betterment of themselves. And in doing so, they become better.
That's absolutely true. And I do struggle to understand how people do get lost and don't find purpose in their life. But I don't understand that. I think it's important, and sport teaches that. But I certainly think that everything you've shared today highlights, the significance of, navigating life. And, it shows how all your choices and decisions, can lead you on certain paths that you may not know. And now you're back in music. Yeah. So, and you also are doing, from what I understand, you're still doing your criminal defense attorney stuff as well. And you've done some consultancy as well, around, military stuff and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't want to be bored. I want to finish the race strong. I don't want to lay on my deathbed or to die having any regrets that I could have done more. I could have done the one thing that would have made a difference in somebody's life that I didn't. And so every day I get up thinking about what can I do today to better myself and better the lives of others. I mean, it's a mantra I get up with every morning. But
that's amazing. That's amazing. And sorry to speak over you there. I will have to wrap this one up because I have guests waiting in the wings, and I really appreciate you giving your, I always say, most valuable resource, which is your time. Actually, there's probably two I should add, and your wisdom. So appreciate it.
Not always true, but okay.
No worries. I'll thank you. This will be shared to these interviews tonight as separate interviews for you to share with your family, friends, and colleagues. So thanks for giving your time, and take care.
You bet. Thank you very much.
So a very, very amazing journey and story there from your retired Lieutenant Colonel Chris Lozano. Appreciate him giving that today. I want to move straight on because these guests are waiting in the wings tonight, and I appreciate them coming in early. My next guest has also an amazing story and a life-changing story. He is an advocate for self-determination from Flint, Michigan. I'd like to bring in Eric Patrick Thomas, Mr. Inspire. I like it.
Yeah. Good evening.
We'll start with that, actually. Mr. Inspire, you have a brand called Inspire. So I'm going to let you speak to your story because it's going to be probably a long one. Well, not a long one, but an interesting one is what I'll say. Which I want you to arrive at the end of the story how you became Mr. Inspire.
Okay, just make sure to cut me off so you can ask me questions because I could talk for a long time too. Actually, it was 23 years ago. So 23 years ago, hip hop artists, we were celebrating our music project, my group called Miscellaneous. And I went outside to check the parking lot just to make sure that everybody was like over on our side, not in my neighbors' yards, and just making sure things were good. And then I was going back into the house and I was right by the steps. And then someone came around the DJ van or was in the parking lot, pulled the gun and opened fire. Instantly, I got hit with the bullet in my third and fourth vertebrae, and that dropped me to the ground. And I was paralyzed right away from the neck down, and also not being able to breathe on my own, or able to like speak or yell or ask for help or anything. So I just laid there while I could hear the chaos, going on around me, not being able to do anything, and kind of going in and out of consciousness at the same time. Uh, One of the great things is that there was a person at the house, at the party that um, was taking EMT classes, and he did come out and stabilize me until the ambulance got there. And then, of course, you go from that scene to the hospital, and I can still remember, the 4 screws being drilled into my skull, which is for the halo, which is going to stabilize the spine. Because they didn't do any surgery, they just put the screws into my skull for the halo to stabilize it, and then they put tubes in my throat. But by that time, I was there, I was not there, I was numb. I was in so much pain that it was numb pain. And then the tubes down my throat, because I remember chomping on them. And then before you know it, you're waking up. It's in the morning time. I don't remember what time it was when I was waking up, but then I was faced with my mom and stepdad and dad and stepmom and other people surrounding and doctors, and then them telling you, what happened, which you already knew, but now you're hearing it again, and you're trying to just figure it all out while you're still surviving, and then you're trying to move, and then that's where you realize, like, why am I not moving my arms? Why are my legs, like, what's going on? And then that's all being explained at the same time. A lot of things are going on at one time, a lot of emotions, a lot of questions. It's like a snowball of emotions, chaos, and struggle and survival, and that's kind of like where it starts, you know. And then at that time I couldn't speak. I could move my mouth, and then I communicated with eye blinks. So blink once for yes, twice for no. And then eventually I learned how to communicate with tongue clicks. And I think I didn't do the tongue clicks until like after they decided that, with the test that his paralysis, is very high, he's gonna have to go on a ventilator, the life support ventilator. So that's when they gave me the tracheotomy. That's where they cut your throat and put the tube into your trachea. And basically you got this machine that breathes for you. And yeah, and then I think after that might have been a couple weeks since the shooting. That's when I finally was able to eat food. And then I could move my mouth, but there was no audio of it though. So if you ask me a question, I could at least say it with my mouth, and you just have to to lip read. And then
You're right. I'm not trying to interrupt you. I'm just trying to be here. So
no, it's all good.
It's
no, stop me wherever you want to stop me.
Look. I think that I have a couple of questions that have come up, so I will ask them. I was just waiting. I'm wanting to continue. If I should bring myself back in, it will be to ask a question, but don't let me stop you. Sorry about the distraction. But look, I want to ask a question first. Was that perpetrator known to you?
No, we actually don't even know like who did it. There really wasn't ever a real investigation. I just received the incident report this year when we were in COVID, lockdown from COVID. It just happened to be that my mom was with one of our family members, and that family member was with a person in law enforcement, and they were like, he doesn't even have a police report. And then there's a lot of police officers like, what? No police report, that's impossible. And so they did do some digging. They got an incident report, and I do have that. And basically, all it says is, what time it happened, who was there or not who was there, like the detective or the police officer on scene, and the detective that took the case. But that's it. It's only like a half a page, well, a page and a half of incident report. Nobody questioned, nothing. So there's no real like full out investigated police report. So no, we don't know. Just a big question mark. So that's kind of been
23 years ago. You were in a hip hop group. So in that era, there was a lot of people that could have been anything, mistaken identity. There was a lot of rivalry between musicians and hip hop of that era. I'm not sure what part of the world you were in at the time, but wrong place at wrong time probably sounds like that. And no investigation is intriguing, given the result, which is now that you're paralyzed from the neck down. I understand is what your bio has indicated. So I want to ask you, because we're talking, as you heard, I was talking with Chris before about life-changing things, and his getting out of Iraq and being in the convoy as opposed to a helicopter that actually had crashed and killed everyone. You survived a gunshot wound, but how does the emotions play on, and over the period of time, it's 23 years now, to know how close you came to not being here, but also did you go through the stages of like anger and anything like that from the experience and the asking of why me?
I wouldn't say that it was anger. Definitely you have the questions like why me, or what's going on, like why did they do it, or who did it. I know based on one of my friends, Perm, that was in my group Miscellaneous, later on down the road, like a few years later, we were doing some filming, and that question was asked to him, was he angry, or how is he? So the same question you just asked me, I got to hear it from him. But he said that he said bitter, but his answer to that was because I kept talking about like when we would talk to each other, I would say, have you heard anything? Like, do you know what happened? So he was saying that he didn't want to keep reliving the moment because he didn't he was in shock from the night it happened, because he was maybe 10 feet in front of me when it happened, if that. But he was saying that he was using that word bitter, or just by saying that I kept bringing up the event. But all I wanted to do was just know, like, was there anything? Have you heard anything? Did anybody say anything? So it was that with my emotions in hospital and rehab, you're going to go through every emotion. You're like tears are going to come down from you, and you're not even going to understand why. Going to rehab, leaving the state of Michigan and going to Inglewood, Colorado, I was like totally against. I don't want to leave Michigan, and I don't know why. It was just because that's the the nature inside, I guess. And you're gonna have every emotion. You're gonna have happiness. You're gonna have nightmares. You're gonna have struggles, wondering why, and then you're also going to be like, what am I gonna do now? Like I gotta move forward, so I gotta keep going. Like this is it. I want to survive. So the decision's made. Survival is already the main decision. So whatever it's going to take on this path and journey, then you have to face. And you're going to have different emotions from the start, 2 years later, 3 years later, 23 years later. Now, when the time was coming up, all you do is kind of reflect and just think about like, oh, tonight I would have been getting ready for the party or getting my hair cut, getting the clothes. Like you kind of replay that. But then you also say, well, how can I celebrate this with everybody? Like celebrate life and utilize that story and tell them. That's how I started that goal, for 23 different, interviews on different shows for the rest of the end of the year. I thought that's a good way to celebrate.
Because I saw your post that it was the 1st of October was 23 years. So, or the
October
post
20th.
Oh, October 20th. So it's coming up.
September 20th.
Sorry, misunderstood. So it is 23 years, and you did reach out, and I think you've got an amazing story, because the story doesn't actually stop with a tragedy, as far as life-changing medical injury. I don't know if I'm describing that right at all, but that's but for you talk about survival, and you took that on took it as the challenge that it is, and you've changed your life around. Now you've spoken to Congress, you've spoken to as an advocate for self-determination. So do you want to speak to that journey? And then let's talk about, you're a businessman too. You could have just just potentially decided that I'm not capable of doing anything, but you've gone the other way and said, I'm going to make change and real change for people and myself. So I know I keep packing things into the questions, but let's talk to, your role as an advocate and why that's important to use your adversity to better the lives of others.
It's a great question. When I came home, I didn't have to go to a nursing home. I went back to my mom and stepdad's house, which was a blessing, because a lot of people end up in nursing homes. Right away, your journey starts. And when you start learning the resources around you, so you're like, okay, I have a disability, and these are the resources around. And one of the places was called the Disability Network. And I was able to meet up with the CEO at that time, Mr. Zelli. And when we had our meeting, he was basically like, I know you might not believe it, I'm 20 years old now. I'm pretty, I'm trying to figure out life. And he's like, you'll be able to accomplish whatever you want to do. Like, you might not believe it now, but you'll be able to do whatever you want to do and accomplish what you want to do. So he was pretty believable. So I was like, all right, man, let's roll with it. Now this time I can talk by now. And he set me up with being able to hire my own staff. So I was able to hire my own caregivers, direct my caregivers, do the schedules, do the interview process, the whole thing. My whole life became a business, like overnight, just a business of my life. I'm the CEO of my life, basically. That's what happened. And he said also, just make sure like you have a great story, get involved, testify. If there's some cuts that are going to happen with like Medicaid or Medicare or long-term care or whatever it may be, that's going to lessen the life of a person's quality of life, then if you will be willing to talk, we'll get you there. And so that was kind of like the learning of this advocacy. I would say that the training grounds was definitely with the Disability Network. They would have the long-term care meetings. They would bring in legislators. I would talk to them. Now, right at the beginning, they just know the story. But see, I started talking to them so much, different areas. I started showing up. They started knowing my story, my face, and then they started to think about the decisions that they made when they thought about like my life and other people's lives, which is what you want them to do. And so you start building this relationship at the same time you're building this advocacy, and you're learning about like assistive technology. You're learning about the ADA, and you're learning about your rights, and it's all a learning process. This is a growing and learning process as you're living, as you keep living. You show up to meetings, you show up to long-term care meetings, you show up to Medicaid and Medicare meetings, like wherever they were having them, you just show up and you start learning and you start learning and you start learning and you start learning. And then eventually there was this other organization called Michigan Partners for Freedom, and they focused on self-determination. And they went out and basically like demanded that we have self-determination living in these communities and stuff, which is a person that could live independently and have caregivers and have the best quality of life ever, based on the resources, which is also funded by Medicaid and Medicare dollars. But we were also responsible on how that money was spent. So this advocacy just kept going. I mean, and then eventually there was times that I was able to go to Lansing and speak at the Capitol in front of the House and Senate and be able to share my story and how I was able to keep living a really amazing quality of life because of these services that was provided, that it is possible and it does work. You don't always have to put people in nursing homes. You don't have to put people in institutions. And then eventually there was times that I could go to Washington, D.C. and go speak there and learn the whole, like how you get bills, sponsored or co-sponsored and then introduced on the floor and then voted on. We met with Congressman Dale Kildee and another guy named Dave, and we basically told him we just pitched our life off, to him. And he took that information and he made a bill called Money Follows the Person, and it passed. And there's like billions of dollars that now it's brought to this country for people to get out of nursing homes and live independently. And they still vote on it today. I think it was voted this year to, keep it going. It's called Money Follows the Person.
You're right. I keep distracting you.
No, it's all right. It's okay.
So that's pretty amazing that you have done that. So one of the things that, and it's just because life is so full of questions, and obviously we alluded to the fact that you do ask those questions when something extremely adverse happens to you. But do you sometimes feel like what happened to you is actually your purpose, that now you are here to do this? Is it like, do you feel this is a life purpose, that there's actually, or do you think you've given meaning to what's happened?
That's a good question, because I've heard sometimes where somebody said it didn't happen to you, it happened for you, or something like that. Because like so many people's lives have changed based on the situation that happened. Like the shooting that happened, this ripple effect of like quality of like progress and empowerment and resilience and inspiring, changes like happen. It's just been amazing. I've been asked the question before, if you could, go back in time and change it, what would you do? And I was like, I would do the exact same thing, because like there's so much change that's happened and so much good. I mean, being able to get that bill sponsored and pass has affected, thousands and thousands of lives, probably more lives than I'll ever really know. The same thing with speaking and testifying somewhere, whether it's a school or a church or a jail, or just, at the retail store where somebody asks me like what happened, because it turns into a full-blown story. Like you don't know whose life you changed, whose life you saved. There may be a person that was about to commit suicide, and somehow what you said changed it. There's a lot of people's lives that you're never going to know that you were a positive, influential impact on them. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I wondered that because I feel like when I speak to people about their passion or their perspective or their truth, when they seem to find a passion or a purpose, it sort of feels like a jigsaw puzzle falling into place that all the pieces were relevant at the time. They didn't feel so, but when they look at what they're doing with that information that they have now, so the experience that they have now, it also that saying that things you can either let it happen to you or it's happening for you is a mindset thing. So I guess what I was alluding to is, was that a mindset, this whole perception that you're not going to be defeated by this, that you can play the victim or the victor, as they say, and you chose to play the victor's role and make something better of a bad situation?
Yeah, I mean, the mindset, you're split in the beginning. You're like, okay, it could be long term, could be short term. You watch movies. Well, how is it going to be? But your focus, your goal is to live life, no matter what those circumstances, challenges, barriers, the ups and the downs, whatever it is, you're just going to keep pushing forward. And, you're going to take 20 steps forward and 30 steps backwards and 10 steps forward and 20 steps back. It's a back and forth thing. The main thing is that you get back up and you keep going and you keep going and you got the goals. Like, the thing is that, like, at that time, did I know, like, oh, I'm going to be able to accomplish all these goals? I got all these goals and that's what's pushing me forward. There wasn't like a lot of goals, but the more and more that you keep living and the more you know that you have more freedom because you have people that are taking care of it, and you're able to, like, really start to focus. Then you start focusing on a lot of goals. And then you got all these goals and you're like, okay, I had goals and dreams, but now they're actually, I can, pursue them still. Same thing with when the shooting happened. Like, I had so many different goals and, like, dreams that I wanted to still accomplish. It felt like it was unfinished. So I was like, I need to stay here a little longer. There's some work that needs to be done. Now, it wasn't like I went from one stage to the other stage, except this stage I was able to now work with people with disabilities and actually have probably more of an impact than what I was doing when I was on the stage doing hip hop music at that time, because this was changing lives. This was empowering people. I don't know. It's like you said, the pieces of the puzzle, they're still falling in place, 23 years later. And everything you learned then, it happens years later. Something you learned 10 years later, you implement 15 years, down the road. You're like, wow, that's why I learned that, So it's a journey.
So let's talk about this journey. Just on screen, I've thrown it up there for you.
Yeah.
Easy Awareness by Design is your business. So
Yes,
not
sir.
only are you an advocate, you actually have to earn an income. You are contributing to society and others. And you've started this brand, and you've started this business, and people can visit the website and they can purchase your Inspire brand. And interestingly, this is a saying that's, I'm pretty sure, up on the website. Actually, might just see if I can throw that website up.
Without awareness, you're invisible.
There we go.
Yeah.
So very, very inspirational stuff. You also inspire Flint. So Flint's not known as one of the most prosperous places in the US. And also you've got, I think the world knows, with thanks to Michael Moore, who is a long-term resident there as well, that your water system in that part of the world is not the best. So you guys battle every day. So not only are you born and raised in Flint, Michigan, you're inspiring people, not just across the US, but Flint obviously is your hometown. So you're also, as people can see there, promoting the Inspire Flint brand as well. So what's with the guitars? I didn't see that. So that might interest Chris, who's still sitting there. So
we have like over 200 different designs of Inspire now, and it just, every day it just kind of builds this new branch to this tree where it started, because it's the people that embrace the, Inspire lifestyle, which is called a lifestyle changing the world. They embrace that, and you're like, wow, I didn't, it still sticks with the same focus and it's positive, but they take it on into this new branch. Someone wears it for they're going through chemo treatment or something. Somebody's wearing it because they're going through dialysis treatment, or somebody just really is inspired by someone and they gift somebody something, or they just feel really good about themselves and like they want to be better and they're bringing out the best in them and they wear it and they're like, I know this brand because it all goes back, as what they say, back to the original person of the brand, which is me. And a lot of times when people see that shirt, they'll say, oh, Eric, they'll be in a different state. Like at the airport, they'll be like, hey, Eric. They'll be like, yeah, I know Eric. And so the story is the brand. You are the story. I mean, you are the brand, but everybody else is making the brand, just amazing, bigger and growing. And that was a childhood dream. Having my own clothing line, that's basically where it all, came from. Bringing this childhood goal, it's 20 something years later, 25, I forget now, like 15 years later or something like that.
So that's very amazing, and it's something very simple. Your brand Inspire, but what you're basically saying is to people, regardless of what area or what your background is or what your adversity is, you all have the ability, or we all have the ability, to make each other's lives better and inspire others to make the most of their lives. And that's exactly what you've done as an example of it. So to own that brand. So Mr. Inspire, as you had, I think
that's what people that happened because people just started saying that. So instead of them just saying, hey, Inspired, like Tony, my friend Tony would always say, hey, what's happening, Mr. Inspire? Our nicknames are, they just gotta take on their thing. I was like, okay, so. And then when I was doing, I'm doing hip hop music again, because this foundation called the D-Man Foundation, they built the first ever barrier-free music therapy recording studio. So then I was able to go back and do music again. So they're like, what are you going to call yourself? And then everybody just started calling me Mr. Inspire. So I was like, oh, I guess so. Let's go with that. I guess it is kind of, it was with the people are the ones that kind of said it,
That's
so
cool. Yeah, it's cool. It's what's needed. So well done for suggesting that as well. And I did put up there this saying, and it's interesting. I saw it's like, without awareness, you are invisible. And this comes back to Kristy, and I will have to finish up on this as I have a patient guest, and I've gone over time because I've had two amazing guests today already, and looking forward to the next guest who's waiting in the wings. But this, without awareness, you are invisible. Interestingly, there's a marketing 101 term that says not advertising is like winking in the dark. No, you know what you're doing, but no one else does. So without awareness, you are invisible. So I know with what my first guest, Chris Lozano, has done, he is giving voice to the experience of veterans there in the US. And basically that's the same statement can be said true of what the work he's doing to inspire others, which is anyone looking to work to inspire others. It's true. Without awareness, you or your cause is invisible. So I really appreciate you being here today, Eric. I really am grateful for you sharing your story and for giving your time to me and my audience. I wish you all the best. And I hope to hear some of your music down the track. Have you got anything up at the moment?
There's a song on Spotify right now, SoundCloud, called "Beat My Belly Like a Bongo." Beat my belly like beat my belly like a bongo. In fact, if you Google that, it's the only song that's ever called that. So I'm the only person.
I'm sure.
The only person that. It's basically like, you remember back in the day when you played belly drums?
Yes.
That's kind of like where it goes back from, except there was food that was dropped on my shirt. And then when Jesse was cleaning my shirt off, it sounded like a bongo. And so I just started thinking that jingle. And then that Saturday, my friend came over and said, I got time to to do some production. What do you want to do? And I was like, well, I got the jingle in my head. And he was like, yeah, let's roll with it. And then that's how that's how Beat My Belly Like a Bongo came out, and I performed it a lot in different places, like all over the different. Like, it's very interesting. It's a fun song. I enjoy writing it, or like in performing it. I'm not worried about people liking it because it makes me happy. It puts me into the place that I like. I've always liked music. I like hip hop. I like wordplay, and it's enjoyable to me. And I don't care if somebody says they don't like it. I'm great with that. I say thank you. Thanks for telling me. Or something. It's okay. I made it because I just wanted, something I enjoy.
I learned a long time ago. I did a short stint on community radio here, which is similar to public radio there in the US, 4.5 years. And it was an independent artist show. And I used to play a lot of music, and I'd just give people airplay. It was called The Crap Show. And we'd give people airplay. And I do have to move on, so I'll finish with this. But, and interestingly, what I discovered is that I would be listening to a song that I just thought was complete rubbish or trash. And I'd get a phone call with someone asking, what is this? And because it was either unique or resonated with them. So I think all art and music is really a beauty is in the eye of the beholder type scenario. So like you say, even if you only have one or two that like your song, and even if it is just you and your mum, which I know my mum watches my podcast, so audience of, one person, it doesn't matter. It's I think there's value in hearing other people's stories, and there's value in you doing your music and all the other things that you do. But I really appreciate you being here and giving your time, mate, and I wish you all the best. So take care and look after yourself.
All right. Thank you for having me.
No worries. So awesome guests so far tonight, and the next one has been waiting patiently. So apologies in advance because she's been sitting here for the last half an hour, I believe. She came in. I'll bring her in straight away. So it's Kristy Sumner, who is a paranormal investigator. So my very first paranormal investigator. Welcome.
Thanks, Craig. How you doing this evening?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Thanks. I appreciate you giving your time, and I can see you in the background there. Actually, I think that last conversation that you joined in with obviously resonated with you, and you're getting some smiles there, Eric. Obviously, a very inspiring character.
Absolutely, and I feel a little insignificant now after listening to Craig and Eric's stories. I thank Chris for his service, absolutely, and Eric what he's going through and the things that he's accomplished. That's just an amazing. Both of them have amazing stories. So I think I'll bring a little bit of levity to the conversation now, but it's a little bit different what we do, obviously.
It is, but I called it navigating life. And these two individuals have actually navigated life, and one came near close to death, obviously paralyzed from the neck down with a gunshot, to his like a spinal injury. But you are putting a scientific approach to question what comes after life.
Absolutely.
And you're interestingly, you're a team of 5 paranormal investigators called the Soul Sisters Paranormal. So I'll throw that up there. I've got a banner here somewhere for you. Let's get it up. There we go. So, and I think I've got your website there. We might actually see if we can throw that up there. Yep. So Soul Sisters Paranormal. So let's get into it. And
absolutely.
I want to know what got you into this paranormal investigating when you've got a PhD in what is it? Something of civil affairs or
public administration with an emphasis on criminal justice. So, my sisters and I have always been fascinated with, the afterlife and what comes next. And we all have an academic background. So as you said, I have a PhD, my twin has a PhD, Michelle and Clara have JDs, and Kim has a master's degree. So, we come at this with a very interesting research minded perspective, as you said. And my sisters and I live in different parts of the country. And so routinely we would get together and have girls' weekends. And then in 2013, we had a family friend who sat on the board of the Moundsville State Penitentiary, which is in Moundsville, West Virginia, which is one of the most haunted locations in the country. And he said, why don't y'all come up to Moundsville, stay the night in the prison, and see what you find? And we jumped at that opportunity. We had a couple of night vision video cameras, a couple of voice recorders, and we left that experience with what we felt was extremely compelling evidence that there was something in that prison with us, something unseen. And we really wanted to delve into that further. So we decided to form Soul Sisters Paranormal, and we came up with our marketing and our logo and our brand, and have just been going around the country ever since, looking for evidence of the paranormal, but also highlighting the historical narratives of the historic locations that we go to, such as Fort Mifflin, Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, the Villisca Axe Murder House, a lot of those locations that some of our audience may not have the opportunity to go to. We want to bring them that experience.
Yeah, so I have seen your YouTube channel, and I will put that up as well so people can go and have a look. You do go into these places, and I don't know whether I believe or not. I don't know you can get me to stay overnight in some of these videos that I've seen. So I do want to ask, give some examples. I know they're on your website, of some of the places you've visited and some of the questionable things that you've actually experienced while in those houses. Now, I'll just do a disclaimer. I have heard that there is a question around whether you have a heightened sensitivity when you're in these environments, expecting things to actually happen. So you're looking for answers that may not necessarily be there. But obviously there are things that you record that you can say are unexplained. So can you give some examples of what you've seen in some of these places? Explain what the places were, not so much all their history, but what are some of the things that really, including the penitentiary, that had you questioning if there is something definitely beyond, or definitely beyond.
Well, absolutely. And, back to your comment about you don't believe whether or not you believe or not. And that's fine. When people approach me and say, well, I don't believe that is absolutely fine. I'm not trying to convince anybody of really anything. What we're doing is we're building this case, essentially. We'll go to these locations. We will control for every environmental factor that we can: light, noise, wind pollution, air pollution, anything that we can say those are environmental. And then absent that, we will put forth the compelling things that we cannot explain. And whether or not you believe it, that's on you. My trying to convince you of this is like trying to convince you that my religion is correct, and I'm not going to do that. But what I'm doing is building this case that says these are the things that I cannot explain in this moment. So, for example, we were at the Exchange Hotel, which is in Gordonsville, Virginia, and this was built as a hotel in pre-Civil War, and then during the Civil War, it was transformed into a hospital for both Union and Confederate soldiers. So over 700 men died in this facility when it was a hospital, and so the reports are that there are children, there are apparitions that can be seen. So we decided to go to this location, and we stayed the night in this former hotel / hospital. And there were 5 female investigators that night. We have no men on the team, and we have certainly no children on the team. So we set up voice recorders in different parts of the facility, and we left them to run during the investigation. And one of the voice recorders during the night captured a male's voice very clearly saying, "I don't know, I'll be back at 4:30. That is something that I cannot explain, because I can verify that there were no men in the house, and yet I have this gentleman talking on our voice recorders. A few hours later, another voice recorder captured what was a child's voice saying, "Hi, this is my bed," to a voice recorder that was sitting on a bed. And again, I can't explain that. So those are the compelling things that we find. And like I said, we control for everything that we can. So when we come up with these voices, or we see shadow figures, when I know that nobody is in that room, I can verify that nobody's in the room, yet I see shadows going past our cameras and cutting through our laser grids. Again, those are things that I cannot explain in the moment. So to me, it's extremely compelling that there is something there that to me is unseen, but we're able to see and hear it.
I think, and when I give the disclaimer, I don't know. And I think what I do like about paranormal investigation is that obviously people have experiences that are unexplained, and that what you're trying to do is apply a scientific approach to answer some of those questions. And I do believe, from what I've seen of your YouTube channel, you don't tend to put anything in there, or you do your own disclaimers if you're not 100% sure. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're trying to, again, hoodwink anyone into believing what you believe. It's just reporting what occurred mm-hmm. and showing the evidence. And if people want to go and check that out, I did put your YouTube channel up there. So they can go check out the YouTube channel, and hopefully that's correct.
Soul Searchers Paranormal, correct. Yep.
Yes. So they can go and check out the YouTube channel. But I want to talk to the scientific methods that you apply. So you sort of alluded to it a little bit. So you talk about laser grids, and you have audio recorders, you have night vision. Do you want to talk to each of the sort of pieces of equipment? You also have a spirit box, I think, that I've seen in one of your episodes. Are you able to expand on what equipment you're using and what you're trying to use it for?
Absolutely. Well, the first things that I mentioned, again, are voice recorders, because I feel that those are going to give us what I would consider the purest form of paranormal evidence. When I have those voices of a man or a child, and I know that there are no men or children in the area, those are very easy for me to explain and say, okay, I cannot, I don't know where these are coming from. So this is a pure form of paranormal evidence that I feel. After the voice recorders, we do have night vision video cameras, and typically we couple those with a laser grid. So we'll sit one right beside the other. And the idea being that if a shadow figure crosses across a hallway or a doorway, it will cut the laser grids, and we'll capture that on camera. We've been very successful doing that. We captured it at Fort Mifflin, as well as the old Gilchrist County Jail. So we have evidence of that. Again, shadow figures that I cannot explain crossing across hallways and cutting our laser grids in half. So we do use those. We have what you call a spirit box, and that's absolutely correct. It is a small AM/FM radio that's been modified to sweep through frequencies. It doesn't have a very big range. Again, it just fits in the palm of my hand. And when you turn it on and you start what we call the sweep rate, it basically jumps through every frequency. So when you turn it on, it goes as it's sweeping through all of the AM and FM frequencies. And the theory is that spirits can use that white noise to communicate with us. So in theory, you should not hear a phrase come through that spirit box, because it's going so quickly through radio stations. So when you do, again, that's extremely compelling. So for example, we were at the Ma Barker house in Central Florida, and we were in the room where Ma and Fred Barker were killed by the FBI in 1935. And so when we set the spirit box up, we were asking questions. And I asked the question, what happened in this room? And through the spirit box came the phrase, "They murdered us, we the ones dead." That entire phrase came through. And again, you shouldn't hear that, because again, you're going through hundreds of radio stations very quickly. So when that came through, it was extremely compelling. So we have the spirit box. We have different pieces of handheld equipment that will measure energy in a room or static electricity in a room. So for example, our K2 meters, which were designed by electricians to find electricity in an area, basically, it's just a handheld piece of equipment that has a light array on it that goes from green to red. And if there's no energy in the room, it will remain constant at green. But if there's energy introduced into the environment, it will spike to orange, and then ultimately to red if there's that much energy. So to have something like, you go into a prison where you know that there's no energy, there's no power on or electricity on to that location, and you have these spikes in those meters that are designed to measure energy. Again, that's extremely compelling, and something that I will use as evidence to say, I can't explain what's going on here. So we'll use those in what we call EVP sessions. So we'll sit down and ask questions in a room, and we'll have these K2 meters sitting there, and we'll ask the spirit to touch it or walk up to it. And a lot of times we've had evidence where it's at green, it's sitting by itself, there's no energy introduced to it, but yet it will start spiking to red when we ask it to. Again, that's extremely compelling to us. So those are the typical things that we use, and we also couple those with what we call trigger items. So for example, if I go into like the St. Augustine Lighthouse, and I know that through our research that one of the lighthouse keepers that is reported to stay there like to smoke a pipe, we'll bring a pipe and see if we can get interaction with that. Or, if we go into a bar, we'll bring a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of beer and see if we can get some responses off what we call those trigger items. So those are the typical things that we'll use during an investigation.
As I said, I watched a few of your videos, and you had 2 axe murder scenarios in your videos, and I found the stories behind those absolutely intriguing. And one of those was quite famous. I think it was father and mother that were murdered, and the daughter managed to be found, I believe, not guilty. So do you want to speak to that house and how it's almost kept as it was? In fact, a lot of these haunted places that you have entered do appear to be kept in their original condition, which suggests that maybe they haven't been able to be inhabited for periods of time because people have obviously found that there's something going on there.
And you're absolutely right. So that the one that you were speaking of is the Lizzie Borden house in Fall River, Massachusetts, and that was a case that happened in 1892. And Lizzie Borden was the daughter in this house. And on the morning of the murders, they went into the house and they found her stepmother Abby and her father Andrew bludgeoned to death. Both of them bludgeoned to death with a hatchet. And Abby was struck 18 times in the face, and Andrew was struck 11 times in the face. And so they arrested Lizzie Borden in 1892 for that murder. But during that time, people thought that, a woman wasn't capable of doing something so heinous. So a jury of 12 men found her innocent in 1893. And so she actually, lived the remainder of her life in Fall River, which was interesting that she never left the area. But she was found innocent. She died there in Fall River several years later. But going into that house was extremely interesting to us because you're right. They kept the hardwood floors, the doors were original, the door handles. So you're walking in and having a very tactile experience with history. You're touching the doorknobs that Lizzie touched. You're walking on the floors that she walked on and going through these rooms. And it is a very interesting experience for us because, like I said, you're connecting with history on that level. So we went in there, and again, there was 5 female investigators that night, and we actually stayed the night there. We went in about 4:00 in the afternoon on a Friday and stayed until about 10:30 in the morning on the Saturday. So we stayed the entire night. We slept there and came away with some very compelling evidence. Again, there was no men with us, but yet we were capturing male voices. We captured the sounds of children laughing. When we were all down on the first floor, we captured footsteps running across the 3rd story when we weren't up there. So very compelling things like that was what we captured. But we have had the opportunity to go to that location, to Villisca, to the Villisca Axe Murder House, which is out in Iowa. And again, same story. It's one of these old farmhouses that has really withstood the test of time. You go in again, you have the same floors, the same doors, the same windows, and you walk up and you really have that sense of connecting with history on that level. And then, once we really put that forward in our videos, then we couple that with the compelling evidence that we have found during the night of our investigation. So again, the history is so important to us. And even if we were to go into a location and not find anything, what we considered compelling paranormal evidence, we would still put forth a video because we feel the history and the narrative around that history is so important to the preservation of those historic places.
So it's absolutely intriguing that you have pursued this as, I will say, a passion, because it's not every day that you do stumble across people who actually have had experiences, whether they like spiritual or unexplained, but to find someone who's turned it into a passion with her sisters or siblings and friends, it's quite intriguing. And you're creating, I'll put the YouTube channel up there. It's a little bit hard to sort of see. I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit, but I can see your latest episode there, Sleepy Hollow, Landmark Legends and Lore. So that's only just gone up in the last couple of days, I can see. So what are some of the scariest moments you've experienced in this, where you question whether you're actually knocking on the door of something that you shouldn't?
I'd say, first of all, I'm actually more scared of humans than I am of ghosts at this point in my life. But we were at the old Gilchrist County Jail, which is in Trenton, Florida. It's about an hour's west of Gainesville, Florida, if anybody knows where that is. And on the first night we investigated, we've been there several times. The first night that we investigated, it was actually just myself and a friend of mine, Miranda from Ghost Biker Explorations. She and I had collaborated on this investigation. So she and I were the only two people in that building. And this is a small jail. It was built in 1928 and it ran as a jail till 1968. And then it was abandoned for decades. And it actually became a hotbed for drug activity. So people would go in there into this abandoned location and make drug deals. And then, so all those seedy things that went on there. And so there was actually a couple of drug dealers that were killed there, verified drug dealers that were killed in the year 2001 and 2001. So we had those verified deaths in that location. So we went into this location, and both she and I are licensed to carry handguns. So we had our handguns on us when we went into this jail for the night. And again, just for things that may happen in the real world. And we weren't really feeling anything to begin with. We really weren't picking up on anything. Our equipment really wasn't picking up on anything. And so Miranda said, what if they think we're law enforcement? So to prove we weren't law enforcement, we said, we're going to take our guns off and just put it on this cot here so you can see that we're not law enforcement. So I took my gun off and I put it on the cot. And Miranda, as she was taking her gun off, she was putting it down and she said, I'm putting this down nice and easy. And right behind us, a guy says, good. And there's nobody else in the building with us, but we hear this voice right behind us saying good. And after that, the night really was on with regard to compelling evidence. We were capturing other EVPs telling us to get out. We were seeing shadow figures. We were capturing shadow figures. All of our handheld equipment that night was giving some indication that there was energy levels that we couldn't explain because there's no power to the building. So it was a very compelling night with regard to evidence. And so I'd say that was probably the most active location that we've been to. Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary in Tennessee would be probably the second most active.
Have any of the five soul sisters question whether they want to be still a team of five? Has anyone sort of said, I don't know that I want to do this? Or are you guys really that fascinated by the whole process that and you're all there, and like you say, you're more scared of real people than ghosts?
We've had moments where we've had subset of the team, not because of being scared or frightened, but because just travel restrictions and all of that. So there's been times where it's just been my twin and I, or I'll collaborate with somebody else, or we'll have three of us. So we have various on investigation. We have various numbers during each investigation, but for the most part, we're all in. All five of us just absolutely love doing this. It's something that, again, just being able to walk into these locations, not many people can say that they've stayed the night in the St. Augustine Lighthouse or Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary or the Lizzie Borden House, but we can say that we've done that. So just to be in these places for the historical aspect of it, that is the most compelling part. And then to be able to couple that with things that we can't explain, we're all fascinated and we're all in.
So I don't think my house is haunted, but I do have a story for you that you might say, well, maybe there is something to this. So I do recording, obviously, here and in this room. And I actually, a few weeks back, did a recording where I asked a question, is it a bike? Because I couldn't remember the word. And I distinctly hear a voice say, yes, it's a bike, to which I responded, yes, it's a bike. But I thought I might have sub-verbally said it. And I listened to it over and over and over and again, but I couldn't place the other, it didn't sound like me, but it's there. So it got me when I saw you recording voices. I've never seen anything that goes bump in the night in this premises, but I certainly was questioning when I listened to that, when I listened back, because I was listening through headphones. And I asked the question. It was quite intriguing. So when I saw what you actually do, I was thinking, wow, there might be something more in that. I thought I was actually going crazy, which sounds crazy. And people, it's up on Facebook, then go and have a listen to it, see for themselves, but it is there. And I listened. It was enough for me to listen and go, is someone actually answering that question that I just asked myself out loud in the audio? Because I actually asked the question, then I hear an answer, but then I say, I actually verbalized, yes, it is, but I heard something else or someone else. I don't believe it was me, but it might have been under my breath. That's the problem. I don't know. Like, different experience to you, but it was certainly had me stopping and listening to the audio.
And that's absolutely right. And when people say, I think my house is haunted, or I think my business is haunted, the very first thing I'll do is I'll hand them a couple of voice recorders, or tell them to go purchase voice recorders, from Amazon, and just say, just turn it on and record during your day, and just set it up and just record, ask questions, talk and be verbal in your house like you normally do, and then go back and listen. I always say a lot of people hear, but not a lot of people listen. And you've got to go back and you've got to do, and when we can complete our investigations, I have 10 voice recorders. I have 20 night vision video cameras. And after each investigation, we sit and we listen to every piece of audio that we captured and watch every piece of footage that we captured, just for that very reason, to see if we captured something that we can't explain or didn't hear in the moment. So that is absolutely, that's a very compelling story. And you may actually have somebody that's, sitting on your shoulder answering your questions for you.
Yeah. So you're looking at the scientific side of this.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're dealing with these experiences, I call them experiences because even though you're looking to see if there is something there, it is really a phenomenon. So you're not even necessarily, you're using the word paranormal, which basically means it's like beyond the normal, what we experience.
Correct.
So you're not even trying to pretend that they're ghosts or anything like that. Really, you're just saying there is unusual activity that can't be explained. Is that correct?
That is correct. But I do feel that the things that we're going in and trying to communicate with did have a human experience at some point. And in my mind, the human experience is we all want to be noticed. Nobody wants to go through life being invisible. And I think that's the same experience with those that we're trying to communicate with. They want to be noticed. They want to have their story told. Back to the Ma Barker example, when I asked that question to the spirit box, what happened in this room? The answer was, they murdered us. We the ones dead. I think that's their story. Yes, they were killed by the FBI, but in their mind, they were murdered, and they wanted that story told. And that's what I want to do with these narratives. But back to that question, we are trying to approach this again with that scientific mindset. And there's been places where we'll go in and we find things that are environmental. I've had to tell homeowners and business owners, I totally believe that you're experiencing these things, but I also believe it's caused by these lights. It's caused by your neighbors doing this, or this wind. You have this window cracked and you just didn't know it, and this wind is coming through. So we can try to find those environmental factors first before we put out anything that we can't explain. And so that's really how we do approach those investigations.
So there are different types of hauntings. Like there's like poltergeists, there's ghosts or apparitions, there's all these different things. So do you want to describe some of those? Obviously voices and footsteps and knocking, knocking tends to be associated with poltergeists and things. Do you want to explain the difference of what they are? And do you have a theory? So let's say it is spiritual and there's spirits or ghosts or energies that are left behind that haven't found their way to a beyond. What I'm trying to be as objective as I can.
No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
I don't know what I don't know, and I don't pretend to believe I know anything. So I'm trying to put the question without putting any sort of religious bias or anything on it. But let's say that it's spiritual, and there is a spirit, and we have spirits. Do you want to talk to what some of these potential entities then may be, if they actually indeed are entities? That's pretty objective to say like that, I think.
Okay. So I'm going to answer that question in two ways. The first one, I will say I'm Christian. I do believe in God. I do believe that there's something after this, and because of my religious beliefs, I'll call it heaven. So I do believe that when we die, most of us will ascend to that next level, to that next realm. And so, but for me, I do believe that there are reasons why you would stay, that some spirits remain earthbound. I think there's three reasons. The first one is that they do have unfinished business. I know you hear that a lot in popular television shows and media, but I do believe that there are some entities that have unfinished business. So for example of that, my granddaddy died in 1986, and I was extremely close to my grandmother, who we called Nana. And in 2014, I had a very vivid dream that my granddaddy came to me in this dream, and he looked at me and he said, I'm waiting for your Nana. You're going to be getting a call soon. And about 2 weeks later, she was in an accident and she never really recovered from that. She went into hospice for about 4 weeks. And on the day she died, and with permission from my family, I looked at my twin sister and I said, I know where she's going. She's going to go meet granddaddy in this location, in this house that they were living in. And I said, that's where they're going to go. That's where she's going to go. And she's going to meet up with him. And so we went to that house. The power had been turned off because she was in hospice for so long. So we went to that house and we started asking questions with our K2 meters. And I said things like, Nana, are you here? If you're here, can you light up my meter for me? Can you light this up? And through a series of questions for about 30 minutes, we were having back and forth yes and no questions sessions with those K2 meters. So I was able to, what I believe, verify that Nana and Granddaddy met up and they were ascending together. We went back a week later and asked the same questions into the exact same experiment, and we got nothing, no blip on any of our meters. So again, that was extremely compelling to me, and it was also very peaceful to me. But I feel that that was Granddaddy's unfinished business, and now he's moved on with Nana. And so I won't be in contact with them anymore because I feel they've ascended. So that's number one. Number two is I think that they're stuck. For some reason, they know they're dead, but they can't ascend to whatever's next. We were at the Hales Bar Dam in Tennessee, and this dam was built in the early 1930s, and there's a series of tunnels that run underneath the dam, and school kids would use those tunnels to get from one side to the other to get to school. And during I think the 1960s, there was an accident and 2 kids were killed. So when we were investigating the dam a couple of years ago, we asked the question, why are you here? Why haven't you moved on? And we captured a child's voice saying, I can't, I'm stuck. So in that instance, I believe he's stuck. He knows he's dead, but he can't, whatever mechanism, if you will, allows him to ascend, he can't find it. So he's stuck. And then the third one is, I believe that there's fear or retribution as to what's coming next in the afterlife because of the life they lived here on earth. And I think we find that in prisons, in insane asylums, those type of entities, those type of spirits are very happy to remain where they're at because they don't want to ascend to whatever's next for fear of retribution. So those are the entities that I feel we speak to in those instances. So those are the 3 reasons.
My previous guest has asked you a question. Have you reached out to any like TV channels or like the History Channel or anyone like that to actually take up your show?
Eric, thank you so much for that question, and I'm honored that you're watching this segment. But we actually had two different producers contact us. We actually signed with one, but they wanted us to kind of change our format. We're not the type of females that really go in and scream and run out and all of that. So they wanted us to really kind of sensationalize what we do a little bit for a media audience, and so we declined and decided that's not where we wanted to go. And then we had another production company contact us, but they wanted us to bring in male guests, which is fine. We will bring in males in certain instances or those that want to investigate with us, but they wanted that person to be a presence on the team. And so again, we're not going to change our format or our style. And they also wanted us to kind of give up our branding where they would be in control of it. And I decided that that's not what we're going to do. So for us, we're very particular about our brand. And so we actually respectfully declined to sign with them. But, you know, for us, if a television show happens, that's fantastic, but that's really not our driving factor behind what we do. We're very content to build our audience base and those that legitimately want to watch us for what we're finding in our historical narrative that we put forward. You know, I have a lot of people ask us why I haven't monetized our YouTube channel. And for me, it kind of feels a little bit disingenuous in my mind to say, pay me to watch what I'm doing. And because I think it could lead to the fact of people saying, well, you're inventing this evidence because you want people to watch so you can get money. And I feel that would kind of do a disservice to our team. So that's the reason we have not monetized our YouTube channel, because I want people to know that we're not doing this for money. We're doing this because we actually have the enjoyment of going to these locations and putting stuff out there that we find fascinating and compelling.
Yeah. I think you've done a great job to do as many houses and premises and buildings that you've actually done. To stay with it demonstrates that it's beyond, and like to not take any money from YouTube demonstrates it's beyond like that's not what you're doing it for. You're doing it for love and answers by the looks of things. I think there's some unanswered questions. I'm going to allude to some things that, because like I say, I don't believe or pretend to know anything, but my mum, I told her that I always run things by my mother. And
there you go, Greg.
And I said, I'm having a paranormal investigator on the show, and I don't know how that'll go. And I said, and in the sense of, typical, a lot of males don't tend to believe a lot of this stuff, but my mum highly believes in spiritual things. And and my dad's talked of experiences he's actually had. And it's interesting. The reason I like what you're doing is because it creates a conversation around people's experience. So when I mentioned to my mum that I was speaking with you, she actually says, well, you know the story of your father who, when he first moved out to Australia, his mum he was sleeping outside on you talked about having a dream before, so it triggered this story. Mm-hmm. She said, you know, he dreamt of his mum shaking him and waking him up when he was in Mackay on a veranda, and saying that your sister's had a baby girl, and to which he got a telegram later that day saying his sister had a baby girl. Aww. So and interestingly, when they moved, his sister later on moved out to Australia, she was washing the dishes and she could smell her dad's distinct smell of like tobacco. Mm-hmm. And she turned around, and it was not long after her mum had passed, and she says her mother and father were sitting at the table, and she freaked and called out to her husband, but by the time she turned around, they were gone. Mm-hmm. But my brother's had experiences where friends of his had passed, and he dreamt that they visited him and sat on his bed and had a conversation, and he said it never felt like a dream. Mm-hmm. And here's my truth. This is I lost a friend to cancer last year, a female friend, and interestingly, she was struggling with it. I hadn't seen her for multiple times, and every time it'd been a long time, I thought I hadn't seen her. I actually dreamt of her, but I always dreamt of her in a white wedding dress. The day she passed, I actually had a dream of her that morning. I was looking for her, and I remember the dream. I won't go into it, but interestingly, her husband rang me to tell me that she'd actually passed, and I hadn't dreamt of her for the 3 times I never dreamt of her, but the 3 times I dreamt of her, there was always something significant come out of it, and I don't know. So this is like that. You say that's coincidence or not, but I actually told her husband when he rang me that morning. I said, to tell me she'd passed, I said I actually dreamt of her last night, and it was interesting because the dream had we'll go into the dream now. An old friend from school that I didn't really get on with, and interestingly, I went looking for her, and I found this old friend, and I went walking with him, and then we sat beside each side of this building, mm-hmm. on the side of the door, and she comes out, and it always looked like a white wedding dress in all the dreams. She come out and she said, "I'm happy to see you two are friends." And then that was it. But that was the day she died. And I found that experience highly. I told my mum. So I found that experience quite unique in the sense that, the coincidence or whether it is or not, it has you questioning because it's not someone that I dreamt about, and I hadn't, as in on a regular basis. It just didn't happen. But the other period was normally when I hadn't seen her for a long time, was worried because she tried to keep her cancer extremely quiet to a lot of friends, and mm-hmm. I did know, but everything was in her time, and I hadn't seen her, so I was concerned for her, and the dreams alluded to that. It was like her saying, "Don't worry, I'll see you when I'll get to you," is what she was saying. Mm-hmm. And we did, and we caught up not long before she passed. But I find those interesting. I do. They're the things that get me questioning, but it starts a conversation. What you actually do is start a conversation around those experiences that we actually can't explain or seek to explain.
Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. And to your point, I feel that we're most vulnerable when we sleep. That's when we're most exposed mentally, is when we sleep. And so to open yourself up and to have those experiences, to me, they're a blessing. A lot of people said, well, why didn't you warn Nana or anything like that? And, when you first look at it in the context of just a dream, it's like, why would I? Because I don't know, when he said soon, I don't know how soon is. It could be a year, or 10 years, 2 weeks, or whatever. But to me, it was an extremely, when I look at it now in the entire context, it was extremely peaceful. I mean, I was extremely close with my Nana. So to know in my mind that they met up together and they moved on together, that was extremely peaceful. And it also alludes to the fact that when we pass, we're not going to be alone. You know, those that have gone before us or have loved us before are going to be there to help us transition to that next level. You know, because, and you're right, it does open the conversation, because none of us are getting out of this alive. We all will die at some point, and to have that conversation of what happens next, and the things that I've experienced and seen and heard, and to your point, smelled in a lot of cases, just leads me to believe that there obviously is something after this, and that it's not going to be anything that needs to be feared. And so that's really what my takeaway has been from all of this thus far.
I'll finish on, and that's. I think it's amazing that you're embarking on the scientific approach. I think it's good, because a lot of people want answers, and I don't know that you necessarily give them answers, but you certainly try to demonstrate that what people are experiencing in those environments, there is something going on, and you're demonstrating that there is something. And I know that you're not trying to say that you have the answers, correct, but you're certainly showing that there is phenomenon there. And I was going to say, my mum, because I'm going to my mum because she likes this stuff, right? So I can only speak to what
Good job, Mom.
Things I told her. So when I said I don't really believe or whatever, she talks about my friend who passed with cancer. Well, you told me you had that dream, you know. So she throws in, well, you've had experiences that you can't explain either. And I think this is why I like what you do, is there's a narrative that people can then have to talk about those things that we don't or can't explain. But one that she reminded me of, or actually two, she had my grandfather pass and another friend of hers had passed. This is decades, and both of them close to death. And this comes to you getting the dream from the grandfather. Close to death, my grandfather was saying, he said he didn't want to stay in his house. He was a veteran of the Second World War and was in the German army as well as the Lithuanian army when Russia attacked. When Germany attacked Lithuania, he fought for the Russians, and when Russia came through, they annexed Lithuania, so he's forced to fight for the Germans. So that's just what happens when all of a sudden your ally starts to take over your country. So he found himself on both sides of the war. But when he was unwell, he was sitting at a hospital, and he told Mum that he was seeing all little creatures running around his house. Dark figures. He didn't want to have anything to do with them and didn't want to go back there. And interestingly, they were sitting at the hospital, and he handed my mum the Bible, and my mum handed it back and said, I don't think I need this. You're the one seeing little figures running around your house. So to which he took the Bible back. It was quite amusing, and she told me that story. But interestingly, she had another friend who experienced the same thing, who actually said that there were, and she felt there was visible entities close to her death. She had cancer. Mum was very close with her, and she was describing in the house seeing figures or things that she couldn't explain. Almost like in her case, they were more like, they weren't dark entities, they were actually guides. There was people talking to her. So is that, I know this is sort of moving away from what you do, but is that a common conversation you've had with people in this space?
Well, absolutely. And in fact, like I said before, my Nana was actually in hospice for about 4 weeks, which is kind of rare. Most of people, when they go into hospice, they're only there for a day or two, and it's a pretty quick passing. But she was in hospice for about 4 weeks, which, we were in there every day. I was in there every day. I would go in and visit with her. And so I would strike up a conversation with the hospice nurses. We started to form this relationship. And so they understood what I did and how I did it and all of that. So they started really opening up to me. And they said it is a very common occurrence. Almost every person that goes into hospice that is lucid enough to speak will talk about the fact that a relative or somebody is visiting them when that person has been deceased. And for a long time, like I said, my Nana, when she was in hospice, she would say, when I would walk in the morning, she'd say, "Oh, well, your granddaddy was here last night and we danced." And that was a very big thing for them. They danced. She actually started talking about an uncle that I didn't even know existed, one of her brothers, that I didn't even know really existed. He died when she was young, and he was there talking to her. So I actually had to call my aunt, and Nana's talking about this person, and my Aunt Linda was like, "Oh, that's so and so, but he died when she was a baby." And so it's in my mind, a very common occurrence for those that are near death, because I think you're closer to the veil, if you will, at that point. So it was a very interesting experience to have those conversations with the hospice workers, and just to talk to other members of my family about it. And when we first started this, my family was like, okay, that's cool. But now they're our biggest fans. I'm constantly getting calls from my uncle or emails from my aunt and uncle saying, when's your next video? Where did you go to next? Where have you gone lately? And to see that transition, but to also know that they're in my corner, that's one of the greatest things that has come out of this. I mean, my family's always been close, very tight knit, but to know that I've got my dad wearing a Soul Sister shirt, that's pretty awesome. So for me, just having that family backing and to have this experience with my sisters, that's the truly cool thing about this.
Just to wrap it up, what are some of the planned haunted sites on the to-do list?
We actually have 3 that are coming up. We're going back to Henry River Mill Village, which is in North Carolina. We're going to do that in October. We've got an old jail up in North Florida that we'll be visiting in November. In January, we'll be out in Tampa at the May Stringer House. Very excited about that one. And then in February, we'll be going out to Texas to investigate a former asylum, hospital/asylum that's out there. So very excited. We've got a lot of things coming up. We're speaking in symposiums next year. Been invited to several conferences that we'll be speaking at, and extremely exciting things coming up.
That's awesome, and I'll wrap it up there. I think, even though I say disclaimer, I don't believe, I do find it intriguing. I think a lot of people do. It's a popular genre on podcasts and on YouTube. As I discovered once I searched you to do research, now I'm getting all the paranormal shows popping.
Oh yeah,
as happens. So as it happens, so it's sort of being shoved in front of me right at the moment. Thank you. So that's all good. But look, I wish you well with it. I really do. I will be seeing you on my feed for a little while longer, so I'll go and watch some of the shows. Interestingly, for those who may not be into the paranormal, the first probably 10 or so minutes of your shows are actually historical. They actually go into the history of the house. And so just alone the stories that you narrate, and narrate quite well, I must say.
Thank you.
Are very interesting. Just the story behind why you're at that premises is very well done and very interesting. So even if people just, I was going to say funny, don't necessarily believe, if you want to get just the history component, just watching the first part of each of your videos is very interesting to hear what's occurred and happened in those places that you visit. So without going any further, to make a short story longer, as they say, or a long story longer, I won't hold you anymore, but I do appreciate your time this morning there in the US, and to all my guests who have been on today, I really appreciate you guys and giving your time. Much love from me to you guys over there in the States. I hope you stay safe during this pandemic, and I wish you all the best with the results of your election, and obviously your president unwell at the moment, regardless of where you sit in the political spectrum. No one wants to see anyone suffering from a pandemic.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate that.
Take care.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Well, 3 absolutely brilliant guests joining us this morning on Be My Guest. I really appreciate their time and energy that they brought to the show. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Of course, these will be split, so each individual guest will have their own episode up, as well as this live stream, which is available on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just throw that up. So if you haven't yet done so, make sure you check out the YouTube channel. Go and subscribe. You can see there's a whole number of interviews up there, and the most recent interviews have had I think 2,000 views in the last couple of weeks, or last week, since last week. Hopefully we'll get some traction on these. Be sure to check them out and share the videos to your family, friends, and colleagues as well. Just throw up the ticker. So if you want to be my guest, then I'll just throw it up so you can have a look. So they're all the social medias for people with a passion. Obviously, this is Be My Guest, the live stream, but people with a passion, the podcast, then make sure you check that out as well, and go and follow that on your favorite social media, your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget, this is on the Applaudable Network and will be up on tomorrow. So applaudable.net, that's with an I. You can check it out there. And if you want to be my guest, you'll see there in the ticker that you can email me at mail@applaudable.net to guest on the show. I'd love to have you join me on the show. And I really take pleasure in saying good night and all the best. And hopefully next week you'll be my guest.